All right, let's go to some Queensland issues because there's all sorts of trouble up there as well. $7 billion of Queensland's COVID response measures are going unassessed and seemingly unmonitored. A failing by the Queensland government to keep track of whether taxpayer money injected into the economy is doing what it was intended to do was a red light for the Queensland Auditor General today. In his report, the Auditor General, Worrall, warned the Palaszczuk government to adopt stronger oversight, explaining that both the Queensland Treasury and the Department of Premier and Cabinet told us that although they are involved in coordinating the response, they do not have the complete information about what the uptake rates of the individual measures are, i.e. they've got no idea where the taxpayer dollars are going. Leader of the Queensland LNP and Queensland Opposition, Deb Frecklington, joins me now from Brisbane. Thank you for your time, Deb Frecklington. If these COVID measures were put in place by the Palaszczuk government and they aren't being assessed properly, how can we be sure that $7 billion in taxpayer funds are being put to the use that they were intended to be put to?
Well, Peter, thank you. And it's just another example of the Labor government here flying completely blind through the biggest economic crisis that Queensland has ever faced. I mean, how can a government know where their taxpayers' money is going if they're not tracking it? It's just a blatant example of complete incompetence from the Palaszczuk government here. You know, these are people that are meant to be leading us through this crisis, and it's very clear that they're not even tracking where our taxpayers' money is going. It's completely shocking.
Yeah, well, we know Queensland's drowning in red ink. We already know that. It's one of the issues that will be a feature, I think, of the campaign. But this is $7 billion. B for billion. The Auditor General says the oversight's not adequate. We're now on the cusp, I think we're 2 weeks away from going into caretaker mode, so we're on the cusp of an election campaign. How concerned are you that this money is not being used for COVID-related matters, but perhaps more political pork barrelling going into the campaign?
Well, look, it's deeply concerning, Peter, and it's obvious that the Palaszczuk government have got one goal, and that is to get the Premier re-elected. I mean, the blatant pork barrelling that is happening here in Queensland is out of control. We've seen the Premier of Queensland spend nearly $6 million on political advertising in the last 6 months alone. I mean, this is after the Department of Premier and Cabinet only spent around $2 million in the full 12 months before it. Look, this isn't about forewarning Queenslanders about COVID. This is blatant political corruption from the Palaszczuk government here in Queensland. And again, I say, you know, Queenslanders deserve better. They deserve a group that actually understand that Queensland needs an economic plan. And Palaszczuk and her mob obviously don't have an economic plan, but they have one plan, and that's to waste taxpayers' money to get themselves elected.
I've got to ask you about something that broke this afternoon too. The Crime and Corruption Commission has found that the Premier's former Chief of Staff, David Barbagallo, did not properly declare his business interests while working in her office. As we know, there was a grant, $260,000 connected to a company that came from the Queensland government, connected to a company he was involved in, all the while he was working in her office. Now, they say in the findings that he did not improperly use his influence to get the grant, but the disclosures weren't there and it doesn't meet the pub test and it doesn't meet the crime and corruptions test either. What would you say to that?
Well, look, that was uncovered by us through the estimates process, Peter, and it was shocking then and it's shocking now. But the blame here rests at the Premier of Queensland's feet. She actually lied to the people of Queensland and said that her Chief of Staff at the time had done everything possible to get that Integrity Commissioner advice. And it has now been found by the Crime and Corruption Commission that that is not true. So the Premier needs to come clean with the people of Queensland and explain why she covered up for her Chief of Staff and why she isn't being honest with the people of Queensland. This is just another integrity scandal.